And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, the best day of the week, because it's the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show on Fridays. I'm Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow for Environment and Climate at the Heartland Institute. I am the show host today. Jim Lakely is off. And, we're going to have a lot of fun today. The Climate Realism Show is like nothing streaming anywhere. So I hope that you would like to share, subscribe, and leave your comments. We have a comment section that you can interact with, and we're looking for your comments as well as your questions at the end of the show. And of course, the powers that be don't really like us all that much. And so if you do more comments and things like that, these all convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program and to get the show in front of more people. And a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media did not approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support the program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS for the Climate Realism Show. Heartland.org/TCRS, and help us keep making the show happen every week. Any support you got, we'd appreciate. Next, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFAC, Climate Depot, and of course, my website, whatsupwiththat.com, the most influential climate website in the world. Today we have with us H. Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lucan, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. Welcome, guys.
Good to be here again. Another week, another exciting show.
Yep. I've got one more week of me having this is the last Friday where I'll have my Halloween decorations, and then they will be gone. So enjoy them.
That's cool. So were any of your Halloween decorations Trump related and then destroyed by angry people? No,
see, I have a thing about political Halloween decorations. I actually don't like them. I like it's fun. Politics is fun, but I don't want my yard decorations to polarize anyone, except for people who don't like scary yard decorations. They can go someplace else. But
and my Halloween decorations are 100% like hers, apolitical. Halloween to me is about one very specific thing: monsters. And though I may consider some politicians monsters, I may consider some politicians monsters. They're not the kind of monsters that we should be talking about on Halloween.
Yeah, well, we can't have a climate crisis without some monsters. So,
I will say,
right?
I'm not quite as ambitious as Linnea there. My Halloween decorations, they will come down, but I can't promise they'll all be down by next Friday.
Yeah,
it took me It took me
down this weekend. They'll be gone.
Mine went up over the course of a week and a half, and they'll probably come down over the course of the same week and a half.
All right. Well, be safe taking those down. Stay off the ladders, huh?
Oh, yeah. No.
All right. So we're going to start our favorite feature, at least my favorite feature, the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. I get such a kick out of watching that thing.
Hilarious.
Bill Nye, he personifies climate crazy. All right. So first, an article from Newsbreak in the UK. You don't want to waste time on climate change. TV weather's big problem with the environmental crisis. Well, as a former television meteorologist myself, spending over 25 years on air on television and another 10 or so on radio, I can tell you that we have a limited amount of time to present these things. And this article is actually hitting home to something that's factually correct, because people that are watching a television weather program, they really do not want to have climate change shoved in their face. They want to know what the weather's going to be tomorrow and for the weekend so that they can plan. They don't give a insert your own expletive here about climate change. They want to know the here and now of weather. It's a classic case of weather should not be climate. So, the problem that we've got here in the United States is that there is an organization that's called climatecentral.com, operated by a former Weather Channel meteorologist, Heidi Cullen, and they are out pushing climate stuff to the television meteorologists and weathercasters on a regular basis. And so there has been some of this happening in the United States, but there's also been some blowback. Last year, you may recall, there was a television meteorologist, I believe he was in Iowa, who basically says, I'm done. People are too mean to me because I've been talking about climate. Well, there you go. What do you think, guys?
Can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, I guess.
Good point.
Sounds about right.
My take on it is just what yours is, Anthony. Look, when I go on my phone to check the weather, I don't want to hear about climate. I want to know what's the temperature, what are the wind speeds, is rain or some other inclement weather likely, are there tornado warnings, what's going on today. That's what I go to the weather person for. What's going on now, what's likely to go on this week, so I can make plans, so I can warn my relatives who don't live near me if inclement weather is coming their way. But what I don't want a weatherman or meteorologist, weather woman, to talk about or to tell me about is what might happen 50 and 100 years from now. Because guess what? Even as good as weather forecasts have gotten, as far as I can tell, they're wrong for, say, 2 days ahead, about 50% of the time. And the farther out you go, they're wrong an even greater than amount.
Right.
So for them to pretend, because they've been fed some information from Heidi or other Climate Central meteorologists who are climate focused, they're not weather focused anymore, that they can't get your weather right in the near term, but we can get it right at 50 years from now. We can tell you what it's going to be like 100 years from now. Stupid. And so I don't want to hear it. Tell me what I essentially need to know to live my life today. And when my grandnephews are old enough to worry about the weather, then tell them what weather is going to be coming for them that week and that day.
Yep. Yeah, the way I approached it when I was on the air, and I actually did some climate programs when I was on the air, is I made it separate from the weathercast. I would actually go out and shoot a video segment, just like a regular news segment, and talk about things. I did one on Urban Heat Island early on. And so, I remember the ending of that. I said it's not the atmosphere, it's the asphalt. And people actually really liked that because it was separated from what they needed to know. So this guy in the UK writing about this, he's spot on. Don't mix weather and climate in your local news. All right, let's go on to the next one. Biden's climate splurge. Oh, my goodness. This is just wowzers. So basically, what's happened is that they've thrown out, to paraphrase Carl Sagan, billions and billions of dollars to these private climate advocacy groups. Meanwhile, we're having to beg for scraps here on the TCRS for donations because, our big oil checks have not arrived yet. But it's just the usual projection of part of the left. They are accusing us of exactly what they're getting, billions and billions. And So these advocacy groups, they're out pushing all kinds of policy stuff. Sterling, you've had a lot of experience with these advocacy groups. What's the deal with them? What do they usually
Well,
do?
look, I was actually interviewed for a story on this. May have been this story, though I don't think I was quoted in one story. But I was interviewed at length for about 30 minutes about this big push. So many of these groups, actually, I don't have experience with many of these groups because they're new. They were formed specifically to get billions of federal dollars. There's no evidence that they have any kind of transparency or tracking for how these billions will be spent. There are no requirements from the federal government that they track it, or because Biden, Kamala might not be here in a short time, and basically you've given billions of dollars to newbies who have no track record for spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, much less billions of dollars. A couple of these groups had, you look at their past, because some of them have been around for a little bit longer, but you look at their past and it's like, what was their, how many staff did they have last year? 2. What was their income? Well, about $10,000, $12,000. Suddenly they have billions. And to pretend, if you look at how climate spending goes, that much of this money won't be spent aggrandizing themselves, by which I mean, so are you going to just ship money to poor? You previously served poor communities, trying to help them find housing, help them pay their electric and water bills, things like that, right? Some of these groups are like that. So now you've got a few $1 billion. Are you going to once again pass through most of that money to the people with housing, or are you going to have new offices? How many staff are you going to hire, and what are you going to pay them? The point is, a lot of this money will be drained away just simply to how many conferences will you attend now on housing and things like that. A lot of this money is not going to help the people that supposedly it's intended to help. It's not going to make communities more resilient to climate change. It was a big gift to buy votes. And these groups are probably out there right now saying, hey, you got to vote for Kamala because, we're getting all this money to help you. She's the one that's taking care of you on the climate. It's just crazy. No accounting standard, no accounting standards, no requirement that they report.
I want to read some of the part of the article from Real Clear Investigations about Biden's climate splurge. They say here, although there isn't much public information available about the Justice Climate Fund, whatever that is, it seems to have been an overnight success. After gaining nonprofit status in August 2023, the organization was awarded $940 million by the Biden administration just 8 months later, in connection with the White House's $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund, which aims to provide financial assistance to reduce carbon emission and reduce pollution. The Justice Climate Fund is not the only nonprofit newcomer suddenly to get rich. Within a month of gaining nonprofit status by the IRS, an outfit called Power Forward Communities, which reported 2023 revenues of $100, was suddenly awarded $2 billion. Can you imagine? Anyway.
Look, they are staffed by people who are friends of Biden and Kamala. They are staffed by insiders on climate. They are operating. Does anyone really think that it was coincidence they were founded when they did, when this money was coming up?
Yeah. I think I'm in the wrong business. I repent. Everything's true. No. Seriously.
I mean, geez. These guys are the only guys that get to have government cheese. We never get any government cheese. You know what? I'll even take the government cheese that's literal cheese in the secret government cheese caves that they have hidden away. Talk about bias though, right? I don't think, even if they don't want to support something like the Heartland Institute, I highly doubt that anyone's getting grants from the government who work anywhere near a even climate neutral or even lukewarmer position on this stuff, and that would be halfway reasonable. That's what I liked about the previous Trump administration when they were talking about trying to get together that red team, blue team stuff so that they can actually fund both sides of the argument and see, whose arguments and whose data comes out on top. But of course, that's not the point. This is just a propaganda outlet. Our government right now is, and probably for a long time, is not interested in getting to the truth. They are only interested in promoting their policies. It's really, if like we saw with COVID and stuff, it's not about the climate. They're using climate as like a tool or as like a Trojan horse to bring in their,
absolutely right.
Socialist and worse than socialist government policies and their like globalism and stuff, to use a fun buzzword. That's the real end goal. It really doesn't matter what vehicle they use to get there. So yeah, that's
more immediately. You're right about the long-term goals, but more immediately, this money was granted when it was for a reason. It's a get out the vote. It's a get out the vote for Democrats. Right. That's what this money is for. Why did it go to these newly formed organizations, newly formed just before the election? They've had the money for 3 years now. Why were they newly formed just before the election? Why did they get billions of dollars just before the election? Is to get out the vote.
Yeah, basically the message is vote for us and we will solve the climate crisis. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. As if you can actually, legislate the climate to change. The climate doesn't give a, insert your own expletive here about, legislation. It just doesn't. Anyway,
it's like the big man or the authoritarians in other countries, chicken in every pot. Well, 2 carbon credits in every pot. Get your new windows here. All vote for the right team, and you'll get new windows and insulation. Vote for the right team, and we'll get electric chargers in your neighborhood. You can't afford the cars, but you'll have the chargers.
Right. Okay, so let's move on. The next one, this one is from the stupid it burns category. This one is about climate change and sleep loss, believe it or not. They'll blame climate change on anything, or anything on climate change, I mean. So this one here is just wowzers. Okay, so I'm going to read some parts of the article. Climate change is driving sleep loss as nights get warmer. Rising temperatures, drought, heavy rainfall are increasingly impacting people's health, according to a Lancet study. High nighttime temperatures led to 5% more hours of sleep lost worldwide over the past 5 years compared to the period between 1986 and 2005, according to the latest edition of the Lancet study of climate and health. It marks the first time the prestigious medical journal has examined this metric. The 8th annual Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change report, authored by, count them, 122 global experts, found that high temperatures, drought, and heavy rainfall are increasingly impacting people's health and blah, 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 blah. 122 experts, and I suppose they've never heard of the urban heat island making cities warmer at night. I mean, the majority of population lives in cities, right? And so the urban heat island effect, it's been known for decades, very clearly affects night more than anything. It is just amazing that they simply glazed over this and said, oh, it's climate change, without paying any attention to the urban heat island.
Well, I want to know what other... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Sure. I was kind of going to make a joke again. Anthony, the way to fix this is to ban air conditioning because it's a climate polluter. So that's how we're going to fix this, by making it too expensive to run air conditioning.
Well, let's hope that doesn't come true.
My question is this. When you do these studies, you generally have to rule out confounding factors like the urban heat island effect, but some other confounding factors that might be impacting people's sleep cycles and how much sleep they get.
Well, I can think of one.
That's what I was going to say is how many people are sitting on their phone, either TikToking or checking data or, doing whatever they do on their phone, communicating, watching video,
or get woken up by the phone by some, forgetting to turn the notifications off.
Yeah. Or, I constantly hear these people talking about how climate change is making, is disturbing psychology of people. Well, we've argued that it's climate fear. It's the alarmism. Well, maybe people are so frightened that they're not getting as much sleep. They go to bed and they toss and turn and they think, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. Climate change is killing us all. There's nothing I can do about it. And they can't sleep. I don't know, but my suspicion is there's a lot of factors that may go into, if it's really the case that people are losing, more sleep. And I glanced over the study. I don't see how they ruled out the high variety of confounding factors that might have been doing that.
Yeah,
I lose sleep over climate change, not the way they want to. They want you to, though.
Yeah,
I lose sleep thinking about,
sleep over a lot.
What I got to do tomorrow at work. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because UHI is not just a United States phenomena. It is a global phenomena. I mean, you can look at any city anywhere and find UHI in it, leading to warmer temperatures overnight. I mean, it's all the way from Reykjavik to New Delhi. I mean, it's everywhere. And it is something that you can easily discern yourself if you have a thermometer in your automobile that measures the incoming air temperature, the outdoor air temperature. Go to the outskirts of the city on a windless night, maybe in the summer, and drive, a transect north, south, or east, west along some road that tends to be fairly straight through the city. I did that several years ago in Reno, Nevada, and found a tremendous UHI signature, so much so that one of the local TV stations picked up my report on What's Up With That and ran it on their nightly news, showing how the urban heat island is so huge. And that's the problem that we've got with a lot of our climate change. The urban heat island is so large, so predominant, so common that it is biasing up the climate signature. The climate signature, the climate change signature, mainly is in the lower temperatures overnight. And the reason it goes up is because the asphalt, the concrete, all that stuff retains solar radiation as the heat during the day, and then releases it at night, keeping the low temperature overnight higher than what it normally would be without this stuff being present. And it's a real simple thing. And yet NOAA just says, oh, well, we can algorithmically adjust for that, blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't. And I've proven it. I've proven it through my surface station project. If you go examine the stations that have not been corrupted by UHI or local micro UHI effects, like a piece of concrete being right next to the weather station, and look at those over the past 30 years, the amount of warming is about half of what you normally get from the whole climate signature, the whole temperature signature of climate change. And so it's once again, it goes back to the simplistic things that these folks refuse to acknowledge. And it goes back to the money. If the money wasn't there, they'd look at this stuff and solve it.
I asked them to put Ed's comment back up because that's something I didn't even mention. Look, we know something that people have been worried about. It's the top issue. It's the top issue in our election. But you know what? Inflation's not just limited to the U.S. People are worried about being able to pay their bills. They're worried about whether their jobs will still be around. And, that's a real worry. That's something that people have been known. And it's become more and more of a concern during the Biden-Harris administration with high inflation, with traditional jobs being shut down, with less, people having to work 2 and 3 jobs to pay the same bills they paid before, except they're not the same bills because the prices are going up and up and up. That's something that can keep you up at night.
Right. So we have a website called climateataglance.com, and we have all kinds of facts on this where we talk about, different aspects of climate change and the issues and the reality behind them. One of the things that we've been doing lately is having Linnea record these fantastic YouTube videos, and they have been getting a lot of exposure. So I'd like to run the one that Linnea has produced for UHI, if we can. Andy?
This is Linnea Lukin from the Heartland Institute, here with another climate fact check. Today, we're going to look at something called the urban heat island effect, which often gets left out of the discussion when people are claiming temperatures are breaking records. The urban heat island effect has a big non-climate related influence on official temperature measurements. Urban heat island is a term used to describe the influence that population centers like cities and suburbs have on local temperature. The temperature in cities is higher, sometimes much higher, than in surrounding rural areas because of all that concrete, asphalt, and even air conditioner exhausts and the heat produced by machinery. This is especially true for nighttime temperatures. During the day, concrete and asphalt are heated by the sun, and they gradually release that heat well into the night, warming up the surrounding air and rising nighttime temperature well above the temperatures in grassy fields and other less developed areas. You can test this out for yourself simply by walking on asphalt barefoot on a summer evening and then stepping into sand or dirt. The pavement is hotter. This effect becomes a problem when the temperature stations used to record long-term temperature trends are influenced by it. Research has found that nearly 90% of US temperature stations are poorly sited, located in places where the urban heat island effect is a problem. For instance, many temperature stations are located in what used to be a grassy field, but over time, buildings and parking lots popped up around it, inflating or biasing the rate of warming recorded by the station. Some researchers have found urban heat islands are responsible for almost half of reported US warming. This isn't to say that there is no natural warming, but data show stations that are not corrupted by the urban heat island effect report much less warming than the biased or compromised stations. This isn't just a problem in America either. Other parts of the world have similar siting problems for their weather stations, with devices located on airport tarmacs and other terrible spots for accurate readings. My challenge to you is next time the local weather channel reports a record-breaking high temperature reading, check to see how many temperature stations in your area actually back that measurement up and where they're sited. Often you'll find the official temperature for an entire area is recorded at an airport, subject to a significant urban heat island effect. That's all I have for this fact check. For the sources used as reference for this video, you can check out climateataglance.com, where you can also download a free copy of the book Climate at a Glance for Teachers and Students. If you prefer paper, you can purchase a hard copy on Amazon. We also have an app available called Climate at a Glance for Android and iPhone. Thanks for watching.
Well done, Linnea.
Yeah, and I have a quick comment I want to make about upcoming videos too, because we're not done with these. We're probably not gonna get the same like professional studio group together again for the next set of videos that we're going to do, but they're not stopping. We have more topics to cover. I'm just right now we're in a like experimenting phase to try and produce the best product that we can for you guys. So we will have more of these climate shorts coming up. We're just trying to figure out the best way to make them look as good as possible, so that you guys can have some more nice clean videos to send around to friends and family.
There you go.
Yeah. And the left hates these things mainly because you make so much sense and you do it in such a relaxed, factual way. It causes their heads to catch fire.
Yeah, it's like that one video I did a couple of years ago about Earth Day, where I said, to young people, like, you don't have to be worried that the world is coming to an end. It's not. It's going to be okay. Here's the facts. I still get comments popping up in my X feed of people going like apoplectic over that one. So that was very fun.
Embrace the doom. What's wrong with you? All right. So here's our meme of the week. Things I'm concerned about: totalitarianism or climate change. Well, that's kind of our viewpoint here. As Linnea pointed out earlier, climate change is a tool to initiate socialism and government control. And that's what we're really worried about, right?
Polls reflect that. They're more concerned about politics and the issues. Climate change comes in last or near last in every poll I've seen. and no one wants to spend money on it. Even the people who are concerned about it said, how much are you willing to spend? Will you take $10 on your electric bill a month? No. Will you pay 50 cents more for gas? No. It's an existential threat, but I'm not going to pay to prevent it. So that tells me they're not really that concerned about it.
Yep. It's and so because we're not, living correctly, the government decides to start pushing this stuff on us. And that's where the real friction starts. And that leads us into our main topic, climate change policy, killing the American dream. Yeah, rethinking home ownership. This is it's something that it's just a mind-boggling thing to me. This is in the New York Times, and they're basically saying, well, because you own a home, that's bad for the planet, you should just be a renter. And I want to read some parts of the article for you, and some commentary ahead of it. It seems that virtually every policy that is proposed about climate has some kind of catch to it, such as you have to reduce the amount of driving you're doing, or you have to buy an electric car, or you can't eat meat anymore because it's bad for the planet, eat bugs instead, or you can't fly out on vacation because that's bad for the planet. Now, of course, piling onto all this stuff, the New York Times says home ownership is not good for the planet, and therefore you should just be a renter. And they're talking about things like insurance premium and property taxes as being driven partially by climate change. And so, it's the same kind of nonsense that we see time and again, where climate change causes everything. They will attach climate change to anything they want to push to make you believe. It's simply that simple. And so, for example, in one place, taxes have increased by 18% for single-family homes since 2019. Climate change doesn't act that fast, folks. It's just absurd. What do you think about this, guys?
Well, can I ask you a question, Anthony? Because I'm going to admit I didn't read this article. So I've got a question. You talked about taxes and insurance premiums, and I understand why insurance premiums are going up. Insurance companies want to make a lot of money, and they want to blame it on climate change, not themselves. And cities haven't been keeping up with infrastructure for decades, and so they want to blame it all on climate change and then tax you pretty hard. But my question is, does it, because look, they also claim that having babies, having children is bad for the climate. So you shouldn't have children. Now they're saying you shouldn't buy houses. My question is, are they also saying in this article, I don't know if they do, that single family homes put out more are responsible for more CO2 than the brownstone.
Sterling, we've lost you. He's stuck on the. Oh, there we go. You're back.
Music bleed through the walls, the sounds. Basically, everyone living in dense urban environments and not having single family homes in the suburbs. Did they attack that as well or not? Because that was my first thought when I saw the headline.
Yeah, well, that's that whole 15-minute cities concept that they're pushing. Everybody should be packed in, close by, walk to everything. Don't own a car. Don't drive. Bicycle or walk to whatever, and don't take vacations.
They do mention that rent is also becoming more expensive. They claim because of climate change and with the like rental insurance and the cost of rent from landlords needing to cover that damage and stuff that could potentially happen. But again, it's the whole you'll own nothing and be happy thing, right? They want to scare you out of home ownership in general. At the same time as it actually is getting harder to own a home, not because of climate change, but because of Democrat policies.
Exactly. The Democratic policies that we've seen from the Biden administration over the last 4 years have caused huge amounts of increase in inflation, which translates to higher rents, higher insurance premiums, higher fuel prices, for your electricity or gas. And yet they would just as soon blame climate change because it lets them off the hook. We're not responsible for this. Climate change is responsible. Don't you understand? Get with the program. Right?
Oh, of course.
I mean, look, climate change is responsible for everything. And all the steps needed to fight climate change involve restricting your freedom. Every one of
Exactly.
them.
Well,
Every one of them.
and we can talk too about the insurance thing because we've covered this quite a few times in at Climate Realism. They, the big insurance companies are very, very happy to have the climate change scapegoat, right?
Yeah.
Because they can say, well, we're raising rates because climate change. We're doing this because climate change. Blah 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 blah. And then there's kind of like a parasitic relationship between the insurance companies being able to make these claims and then the news and the alarmists being able to take those claims and use them as evidence that climate change is getting worse, right? So it's like a circular relationship.
It is.
It's
and you're right about the parasitic part, because the climate change policies are essentially parasitic policies. They are all aimed to extract more from the public and give them less freedom. So along those lines, we've got another story about authoritarianism. This is one that Sterling found. It says that authoritarianism is on the rise. Is climate change to blame? So basically, this story follows this guy in the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, I think that's the way you pronounce it, who was the longtime mayor of Davao City. He made headlines when there was a super typhoon Yolanda back in 2013. He made headlines for traveling some 400 miles, one of the worst ravaged areas of the country, along with a convoy of medical and relief workers and $150,000 in cash he was going to hand out. He announced that he told security forces to shoot any looters who might try to intercept the convoy. And then he went on to clarify, shoot them in the feet. That's what I really meant. And then as a presidential candidate in 2016, but, following up on that big tour of giving away cash and, going to these ravaged areas, he slammed as a component the former Interior Secretary for allegedly misspending Yolanda hurricane recovery funds or typhoon recovery funds. And then he won in a landslide. And then he turned into a dictator. Where have we seen this before?
It turned into a dictator. You mean a dictator that the next election came along and he stepped down peacefully after he lost? I don't know many dictators that do that. He wasn't a dictator. Neither, they also try and link Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil and Trump himself. And I forget who else was featured in the story as strong men. Oof. Not every one of them elected through democratic means. Every one of them left office when they lost. Now, we know Trump complained. He disputes the election. But what he didn't do is turn the military and keep himself in power. That's what dictators do. That's what authoritarianism is. They're confused about this. I'm going to stop talking now because I happen to know that Linnea wrote eloquently about this story.
Why, thank you. I did write about this story. This one did crack me up though, because of all of the despots that they could use as examples for this story. I mean, it was written by Grist, so they have a political angle. Obviously, they're going to look for all the what they interpret as right-wing despots to use. The second I saw Donald Trump was among the listed strongmen, I thought, give me a break. I mean, this is going a little, I mean, I guess it's not going far because they've been calling him Hitler for 10 years. So it's not that unusual. But anyway, both sides of this comment are absurd. The climate change is leading to authoritarianism is wrong on both points. One, we do not have a rise in authoritarianism. If you scroll down in the article, there's a neat little chart that was put together by Our World in Data showing the further, bit more. It's a big chart down. There we go.
The one.
No,
right
there.
Right there.
Stop it. Showing democracies versus autocracies, and the prevalence of at least electoral governments is so much higher than it was in 1789 at the start of this data set. It's not even funny. There's a recent dip in recent decades, but something tells me that some of that might have to do with certain left-wing policies that have slowly been increasing in certain countries. I would say, unless they did not include this information, I would say that the like COVID policies and stuff would certainly make it questionable as to whether or not our supposedly liberal democracies are really quite as liberal as we like to claim. So that's obviously absurd. The idea that, authoritarianism is on the rise. Second, all of the examples that they use, it's hurricanes, it's drought, it's wildfire, all of those things are also either on the decline or staying the same as they've always been. So both sides of this argument are stupid. The idea that like the despots that the alleged despots that they listed are worse than people that we saw even, I don't know, 100 years ago. I can think of a few rising dictators from that era. The idea that these guys are worse than that and that it's becoming more of a problem than before is so laughable. I almost didn't write about this because it was so absurd. I thought there's no reason to even debate this question. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fun to write about anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It is just stupid. And that's the stuff that we tackle every day on climaterealism.com. If you were reading something in the newspaper or on a website or whatever, and you say to yourself, that's stupid, go to climaterealism.com, and chances are within the next day or two, we will have a rebuttal to that sort of stupid stuff. Anytime there's something stupid about climate, we're on it, right?
Yeah. Now, when I saw the headline of that story, I just thought, we had monarchies rule a vast bulk of the world for hundreds of years. We had communism rule a vast swath of the globe for 75 years or so. I mean, there's still a few out there, and you don't have to be communist to be a dictator. You can be right wing. But does anyone think that these things wouldn't have happened or didn't happen before the recent period of modest warming? If so, then you're just, Linnea put it best, you're stupid. And there's no evidence that they are on the rise because of climate change. I mean, my wife, my wife's from Venezuela, and I've seen what happened to Venezuela during our marriage, during and just before our marriage. They had elections, and there they had a kleptocracy. So they were these people that, we protect the landowners. In every election, we go to the people and we say, "Oh, chicken in every pot. We'll put your kids in school. We'll pay for their lunches, things like that." And then they did nothing after the election. And a guy who, by force, tried to overthrow the government, and rather than having him executed as treason, they put him in jail for a couple of years. A general or a colonel, I think he was. That was Chavez. He ended up coming to power through an election, and almost, routinely every election since then has been corrupt. Nobody accepts the results of these elections, and they've gone down a very, very bad road. The people are no more taken care of than they were before, but the economy has collapsed. Suddenly they're having to get aid. They were getting doctors from Cuba. That's how bad it is there. They're shipping in doctors from Cuba. So that had nothing to do with climate change. It had to do with political corruption before and strongman tactics now. And Venezuela is not unique.
Right. And I do have two more probably little comments about this story. One, they are correct. They're the only central point of their hypothesis on this that is not bonkers is the idea that instability paves the way for some kind of a dictator to rise up, right? So in the case of, violence in certain African nations, different places in South America and stuff, we've seen unstable conditions, not necessarily just from weather, but economics, all sorts of stuff. If there is instability in a country, that can lead to people being frightened and either giving up to a strongman type authoritarian leadership, or reaching for one because they don't feel like they have anywhere else to turn. I'm sorry, my dog is barking. The other point is, if I can remember it, what was I going to say?
That's okay.
I completely lost it.
The
I
point
got
is-
excited about the one.
But you're
point,
right.
and I forgot
Climate
the other one.
change is causing more forgetfulness in young people.
And dogs to bark.
And dogs barking. Yeah.
The fact is, she's right. They warned about this at the founding of this country. People often trade security for freedom. Desperation makes people do desperate things. The rise of Hitler, for example, was not driven by climate change. It was driven by the desperate situation there, the huge inflation created in the aftermath of the policies from World War I. And he promised to answer that. And he found scapegoats, right? But what he didn't blame is climate change. People often seek Messiah type figures when we face problems. But the instability in so many of these countries, civil strife, religious strife, corruption, corrupt governments, they get a lot of aid, but somehow it never trickles down to the people. That is not climate change. And there's no evidence, because, Linnea went through the litany of them in her article, that the weather's getting worse anywhere. So if it's not causing more floods, so that's disruptions. It's not causing more heat. That's disruption. It's not causing more storms. That's disruption that would call for the strong men. Then what is the result of, in those instances where strong men are coming to power where they weren't before? What is it? It's not climate change.
Right. Yeah. And I want to say one more. I just remembered my other point, because it's something that some of our viewers have brought up as well. If anything related to climate change is leading towards authoritarianism, it's coming from the climate alarmists. Yeah. They want to take everything away from you and have control over where you travel, when you take vacation, what kind of vehicle you drive, whether or not you are able to access electricity all the time. They want to regulate usage like that. If there's authoritarianism, it's coming from them, not from reactions to climate change.
They want to regulate farm production. They want to regulate what appliances you use. They want you to live in smaller places. And, the thing that Anthony said earlier, you will own nothing and be happy about it. That's what they want. And that is authoritarianism.
Right.
So that's why
this is our meme of the week. Things I'm concerned about: totalitarianism, all in red, or climate change. The solutions are worse than climate change itself. That's the problem that we've got here, folks. Yeah. All right. We've had a lot of folks giving us questions. Linnea, take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay. We've got a question about hurricane season here from Bob Johnson, who says, isn't hurricane season about over? So what's the data look like? How did hurricane season compare to previous years? Well, I think it came out.
December 1st is the end of hurricane season. And I haven't looked at all the data, but it doesn't look abnormal to me. It's certainly nothing like the 33 named storms that Dr. Michael Mann said were going to happen.
Yeah, I think we've hit the low range of the prediction from the Hurricane Center this year.
Yeah.
Because they give a range.
The low range being not above average, by the way. Yeah, we haven't had a hurricane.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe Stan's in the audience and he can tell us.
We haven't had a hurricane in, I think, 2 weeks. I think Anthony just said it was November 1st. I thought it was November 30th was the end of of hurricane
December
season.
1st, November 30th.
Oh, December 1st. December 1st is what you said. I thought
Yeah.
you said November 1st. I said that didn't sound right to me. So it's not over yet. We could have some more storms, but we've had another lull for a bit. Thankfully. But right now, where we stand, I think, is at the low end of the predictions and the low end of the major landfalls predictions.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we'll have a show where we do a post-mortem on the hurricane season, particularly targeting Dr. Michael Mann and his 33 named storms, because climate change is terrible and going to cause the whole world to go crazy with hurricanes. That's never going to happen. We'll talk about that.
I'm putting this on the screen, even though it could get us in trouble. I don't care. It's funny. Thank you, Jerry Palmer. I love this comment.
He'll bottle them too.
Oh, yuck. Okay.
We're going to see a South Park episode on that.
Yeah. Chris Nisbet has quite a few questions for us. Good questions too. This one is how much have the trillions we've spent on fixing climate changed the climate?
There's no good answer to that. No one can actually measure it.
Yeah. And that's part of the genius of the whole scheme, right? Is there's no way to prove it one way or another. They can just like claim victory and everyone will go along with it. But as long as they don't claim victory, the problem still exists forever.
Well, also, right. I mean, that's part of the answer to his question, right? Because they haven't claimed victory. We spent trillions and trillions of dollars and they say it's getting worse and worse all the time. So it hasn't had the intended effect. When they're asked to testify, how much will this spending and administration officials, this one under Obama, they've been asked to testify. How much will this prevent? What temperature rise will it prevent? How much sea level rise will this spending prevent? And they say, oh, that's not how we measure success. How do you measure success? Those are the metrics. You're trying to prevent temperature rise and sea level and things like that. In the end, they can show no evidence that the trillions and trillions of dollars spent have done anything to prevent climate change.
This is a good question, kind of from Peter Land here, who says CO2 increases at the same speed even with all the spending, right? And I would say, yeah, it would be very interesting to plot them next to each other and watch that. I mean, it wouldn't be, super useful, but it would be kind of funny to make that plot. I might do that.
Oh, I suspect the spending is going up even faster than CO2.
Oh, talk about exponential. Okay.
Yeah.
Do any other fields of science do this homogenization thing where measurements are polluted by other measurements? I'm sure there's bad statistical science being done in other areas. I couldn't tell you because, I don't know about on the measurement end, but scientists do kind of get a little bit carried away by their own hypotheses in a lot of areas where they'll, for example, like the dinosaur feather thing, they find dinosaur feathers on a particular part of a dinosaur in the fossil record, and then they extrapolate that to say that there's feathers on the entire animal when there's actually no evidence that actually happens. That's a little bit similar where it's like runaway, they're expanding well outside of what the data actually shows. That's my silly little nerd example, but Anthony.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I can't think of a single field where homogenization is used other than in climate change. I think it's something invented specific to climate change studies. And I think about other metrics of, measuring things on the surface, like crops, for example. We don't homogenize the world, we average it, but let's say you're looking to create a metric for wheat production for the globe. Well, some areas are going to be lower and some areas are going to be higher, but we don't go in and try to homogenize to make the higher areas lower or the lower areas higher through some kind of a statistical homogenization thing. That's just crazy. But it seems that we do that in climate change studies.
I will say this. I don't know that they do homogenization. But what I do know is that there have been studies recently that look at peer-reviewed journals. And they find that an ever increasing portion of the studies published in peer reviewed journals, those studies that have actually passed peer review, are false, that they'd have to retract them. This is especially prevalent in the medical field, but not just the medical field. And the point is, bad science happens, and it's more common than you think. Much of climate science isn't science at all, it's science-y, because science is driven by data.
Right. It's supposed to be anyway, but it seems lately climate science is driven by policy and fear more than anything.
Yep,
Right.
that's fair. All right. This is for M4GW, who says, can you talk about the USCRN research stations?
This is Minnesotans for Global Warming. And these guys produced one of the best videos ever of Dr. Michael Mann called Hide the Decline. It was brilliant. And he absolutely went bonkers over it and sent out a cease and desist and lawsuit and all this stuff. So hi, thanks for being on the show. We're looking forward to another one of your videos if you ever get around to making one. But USCRN stations, well, this is the U.S. Climate Reference Network. And the U.S. Climate Reference Network was put into effect around 2002. They started building it up. And they realized back then that the existing station network, the Cooperative Observer Network, was not that great. They didn't want to admit that. So what they ended up doing was creating about 114 stations around the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, that are situated properly. They're away from the airports, away from the asphalt, concrete buildings, air conditioners, all that stuff, well away from it. And they started logging data, and the network became active in 2005. And you can look at it. If you go to whatsupwiththat.com, I have the results of it on the right sidebar, and you can go in and look at the data there, and there's a link to the actual raw data. And so you can look at it yourself. And the thing is that instead of just simply, okay, we're going to use this going forward to talk about the warmest month ever or whatever, they use this in a completely bass-backwards way. The USCRN data is used to adjust down the crappy co-op data. That's right. We're going to, instead of just simply throwing out all the bad data, we're going to adjust it further to make them more compliant. And I believe this is a direct response to my surface stations project and all of the criticism that rightly came from it towards NOAA. They basically said, well, we're adjusting the old crappy network to match the new super duper state-of-the-art network, and therefore your criticism is unwarranted.
I've said it before, I'll say it again.
Climate science.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's like taking up bottled water or sterile water and mixing it with stream water and saying you come up with something you can drink.
Yep.
Michael Johansson,
for your protection.
I think I'm pronouncing it right. Points out that like 50% of the studies in psychology can't be reproduced, and that's not just true for the for psychology or for psychology. It's also true across the social sciences, especially. It is a bit of a mess, and actually, who was it? I think it was Hayek who wrote a whole book about how we are inappropriately trying to apply like hard science type methods for study to sociological sciences in places where they do not belong and that they do not actually show or demonstrate what they claim that they are demonstrating with them. It's pretty amazing that we've been talking about this for, a very long time, and it's starting to become kind of common knowledge that there's a replication crisis in the sciences. Here's another question from Chris, who says, I suspect that climate alarmists aren't that fond of this pesky democracy business. How can they save the world if people can just vote them out? It's kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's not a real question, but it's a good jumping off point.
That's a point that I discussed with Linnea when she was writing her article. It was like, it's no coincidence that so many of these climate alarm groups praise authoritarians. They praise dictators. They looked at China, despite its growing, ever larger emissions, and they opine what a wonderful place it is because there the government can get things done. They do not like, you're right, democracy's pesky. People have to vote and you have to consider other people's opinions. And when it comes to climate, we can't afford to do that. It's an emergency. They want the strong men. They want big government. That's why every one of their policies is ever bigger government. But then they claim people who want smaller government are fascist. The very opposite. You know, you can't be a fascist and be for smaller government. I've never seen that in history.
Yeah. So Chris Nisbet's question speaks right to the heart of something that we've observed in the climate change issue for a long time, and that is noble cause corruption. And if I haven't explained it before, let me explain it again. Noble cause corruption actually came from police departments where they've got some perp that they've arrested and they know he did this. They've got all this circumstantial evidence, but it's not enough to convict, they believe. And so the cops plant something on him. They plant a gun on him, plant drugs on him, whatever it might be, to basically make the conviction stick because they know he's a scumbag and they don't want to get him off the streets. So this has morphed into the same kind of thing in climate change. We are saving the planet, and therefore we are more important than you, and therefore we have to adjust this data, make these wild claims that aren't substantiated, goose the models, whatever it takes to get you to pay attention and get the climate change agenda, out there to basically make you change your lifestyle to live it as we see fit. That's what's going on.
To be fair, I think this kind of thing goes back much farther than modern policing. Socrates, through Plato, wrote about this more than 2,000 years ago, where you have the philosopher kings and the noble lie in the cave. Basically, rulers have to lie to the people for their own good. And they've been doing this for as long as we've had governments, probably even before governments.
Yep. Well, there we go. That's it in a nutshell. Climate Realism is a place you should be visiting on a regular basis. Our streaming partners, of course, are providing all of this content through Twitter and so forth, so be sure to visit them. JunkScience.com, run by Steve Malloy, all the junk that's fit to debunk. CFACT.org and Climate Depot, and of course my website, whatsupwiththat.com. I want to thank everybody for all of their questions and comments today. I want to thank you, Sterling, and you, Linnea, for your expert commentary, and our producer, Andy, in the background, pushing all the buttons to make stuff happen. There he is. Thanks for saying hi. All right, way to go. Okay, that's it for this episode, number 133 of the Climate Realism Show. I want you all to have a great weekend and a great upcoming week. Bye-bye.
Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.